everyone, so I am back with another Let's Cosplay video, and this time we are going to talk about sergers. The reason I decided to make a video on this topic and on this machine is because if you're like me, back when I was first trying to decide if I wanted a serger, I was left somewhere between, yeah, let's get it, it's gonna be super helpful, but also, is it really necessary for my cosplay? So sergers in general can do a lot of different things. Some people use them to sew their entire costumes and they never even touch a regular sewing machine. But broken down to its very core, a serger is used to finish the edges on fabric. A small blade on the machine cuts the edge of the fabric and helps even it out and cut away any already fraying threads, while different threads, my machine has 4, other sergers work with different numbers, but my 4 threads are woven together to lock up that edge and prevent any future fraying. If you watched any of my past cosplay work logs, you'll notice that on a lot of different fabrics, I do use my serger before I actually put the pieces together. Some people do it afterwards, and like I mentioned already, some people use the sergers to put their whole cosplays together. Honestly, if you meet someone who uses the serger to sew their entire costume, you should honestly be a little in awe, because I am so afraid that I'm going to work my fabric wrong and that little blade is going to cut a hole right in the middle of my costume. So I always do my pieces before I sew them together, just to be safe. So while a serger is a super awesome piece of equipment to have and to add to your arsenal, the question still remains, is it absolutely necessary? Some people don't want one, some people feel they don't need one, and some people just don't have the budget for them. So does that make them any less of a cosplayer because their seams aren't professionally finished? The answer to that technically is no, but there are quite a few situations where having serged seams and having finished edges is super beneficial to your cosplay. So a lot of fabrics fray a lot. We've all worked with different fabrics where we buy it from the store, we get home with it, and somehow in the bag it's just started unraveling itself, kind of like how headphones get tangled up. You take your eye off it for 1 second and it just goes to hell. So imagine if you were to just cut your pieces out of this super fraying fabric, sew them together, and just wear your costume 100, 200, 300 different times. Nothing is there to prevent the edges of this fabric, the threads, from coming undone just as it did when you were working with it. And eventually they're gonna come undone enough that they're gonna reach that line you sewed that's holding the pieces together. And once it surpasses that line, your seam's gonna split open. Especially high areas of contact, like on your jackets when you're bending your arms, on your pants when you're sitting down, getting up, climbing on things. High contact points are going to bust apart so much faster, but eventually everything will bust apart if your edges are not finished. Now there are ways to get around this fraying without using a serger. You can trim the edges of the fabric with pinking shears, that definitely slows down fraying. You can do a rolled hem, a double hem, you can put bias tape around the edges, but not everywhere on your costume is it going to be feasible for you to use one of these little tricks. And yes, you can definitely do your straight stitch to hold the pieces together and zigzag stitches to try and prevent some fraying, but eventually the fabric will come undone. And in an ideal world, fabric wouldn't fray at all. But unfortunately, we don't live in an ideal world, and I've worked with fabrics that have left threads all over my floor and all over my clothes. But, you know, we just gotta do what we gotta do, right? So this actually brings me to my next point. If you ever watched Heroes of Cosplay, which I'm sure most or all of you did, there is an episode where Yaya Han is competing in the costume contest with some friends. She's getting prejudged, and she's actually getting upset that the judges are not flipping and checking the seams of her cosplay. The reason she got so upset is because as a judge herself, just like I know when I judged, that is something you are supposed to look for, especially if somebody's going to be entered in the craftsmanship portion of the contest. If you're entering a contest, the truth is judges are going to expect your costume to be on that next level. They're going to want things to be as professionally done as possible, and especially if you're entering a higher level of the cosplay contest, they're going to be scrutinizing every tiny little detail of your cosplay. Now, to add, if you do enter the beginner or novice, categories, if you are new to cosplay, they're not really going to look for those things, so don't stress about them. This is more if you're trying to enter craftsmanship on a higher, medium to higher level. Essentially, think of it like this. If you went to a store and bought a shirt or a pair of pants and flipped it inside out, you're going to see that the seams are serged. If you bought a costume from a factory or off of eBay or something, again, the seams are going to be serged. Having serged seams kind of equally relates to having a professional finish. And realistically, you could order a costume and it could come in and be the worst quality. It could be made of the nastiest material, it could be plasticky, it could be rough and scratchy and awful, but I can guarantee you the seams are probably gonna be serged. So even though it looks bad and is made out of the worst kind of stuff, it's not really gonna fall apart. Or, I mean, at least it shouldn't fall apart. So the question is, do you really need a serger to cosplay? The answer is no. You don't really need a serger. You can make costumes, you can find ways around that pesky fraying. There are tons of other ways to get by without one. Is it super helpful, and does it take your cosplays and the costumes you make to that next level, especially if you're competing? Yes, it definitely does. Now, they're not necessary for every costume. If you're working on something that's leather or armor or something, obviously you're not going to need it. If you're working with fabrics that don't fray, obviously you're not going to need it. But if you do find yourself working with things that fray, if you do want your cosplays to have longevity and durability so you can run around and climb and jump and just do whatever you want to do without having to worry it's going to fall apart, I say get a serger. To end this video, I hope in some way it was helpful to you. Maybe you were on the fence about getting one and this led you one way or another, or maybe you don't have one and this helped you decide to start saving for one, or helped you decide that you don't really need one. Doesn't matter. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.